Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity and Love. Amazing guests with incredible insights from all over the world. Today's no exception. From the UK, we've got Peter Merry. Peter has a tremendous background: author, innovator, social entrepreneur, activist, folk singer, theater director. I could go on and on. I'm not kidding. He wears 50 hats. Great sense of humor. Just back from an amazing trip, Northern Italy. Hopefully he'll share a little bit about that with us. I did want to mention a few specifics, though. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at Ubiquity University, co-founder at Ubiverse, fellow at the Center for Human Ecology in the UK, where he also did his MSc. He got a PhD via the Wisdom School at Ubiquity. And again, a bunch of other titles, experiences, super learned, I think is how I'll put this, and ever expecting or ever looking out for humanity's growth, looking out for all of us. So Peter, welcome to Angels, Positivity and Love. It's a total treat to have you on. We're super lucky. We're a small show. We do have a big footprint with the guest list simply because we do offer folks the chance to meet, see, hear, feel angels before and after the show usually. Peter, how have you been? It's good to see you again.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, good. Having come back from a couple of weeks off and, just dealing with the email inbox at the moment. But apart from that, still got some of the holiday vibe. Yeah.
Well, I saw that you did a recent interview with Suma Gowda, huge fan of hers here. She'll be taping a show soon and also be on the APL show. Can you take us through how you came to focus this much on humanity, consciousness, sort of what's next for all of us? Where did this originate from?
Well, actually, I think it was probably a moment when in my early 20s, when I was just finishing my studies. It was a combination of things, really. I was studying French and German, but I was also doing a lot of theatre. So I had a very great interest in theatre, and I was interested in the absurdists and, Sartre, Camus, and those kind of folks, Alfred Jarry. And they were kind of pointing a finger at some of the absurdities in society and how people live their lives and things. And that started, to awaken my critical mind, I guess, a little bit. And then I came across this amazing French writer called Antonin Artaud, who was partly, locked away in an asylum for a while because people thought he was insane. But he wrote very lucidly on sanity and insanity, but in a way that was very, very raw and kind of, I'd say, removed the mask off life. And so that was kind of getting me a little bit into a rebellious mood around society. And then at a very good moment, my mother, who's a Quaker, gave me a copy of Fritz Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, which is like a really great small book that completely dismantles our economic system and points out the core flaws in its design and operation. And I guess that's what kind of catapulted me into the world of activism more, where I was, well, we seem to have created a system around us that really doesn't serve us at all or the rest of life on the planet, and it should change. And so that's when I got into, I joined the NGOs like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace and all of that, and got involved in green politics and things. And so that kind of kick-started things. Became very much involved in the direct action movement at that point in the UK. Things like Reclaim the Streets and the kind of bicycling movement to try to, create space for all of anything that was a bit in your face and kind of anti the establishment, I guess. And then I headed off spent a year in Paris working with a theatre company there, an Iranian director who'd worked with Peter Brook, who was a brilliant English director who I was a big fan of, and who'd worked with him on a massive production of the Mahabharata. And that was the kind of physical awakening, that work, because it was a combination of acrobatics and improvisation, and challenged you as a human being on many levels. So that opened me at one level. And then I was starting to read, little bits of kind of spirituality and then Jonathan Porritt's stuff on the green movement. So it was accumulating, I'd say. And then I went to, then at the end of that year in Paris, I asked myself a question, which was, did I think theatre could change the world? Because I was interested in changing the world. And at that moment, my answer was no. So I decided to do something called voluntary service overseas, which for those in the US is a bit like Peace Corps, and went to Ghana. But shipped out a box of books that included Gurdjieff and those kind of folks, and was sitting there in this rural village in northern Ghana, completely all my cultural handles gone, reading this stuff, as well as all the kind of critiques of the global development system and the global economy. So it was a mix of the spirituality, esotericism, and kind of economics, global economics, and all of that kind of thing. And that, I think, really the combination of the context and the content, I guess, kind of set me on my path. And it was at the end of that year, Ghana was involved in a World Bank IMF structural adjustment program, which meant that basically they had to turn their economy into something that looked like what Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher would prefer, and had to cut public spending, including to the schools. And the school where I taught in the north of Ghana, basically the kids didn't have the money, or parents didn't have the money to pay for the kids to go to school, so they would bring a goat or something. But this program basically forced the school to insist on people paying their school fees, otherwise they wouldn't have enough money. And that one day they announced that they were going to close the dining room to anybody who hadn't paid their school fees. And this is a boarding school, because it was a massive catchment area, and the kids, would otherwise be walking for days every day to get to school. And the day they enforced that, a bunch of the kids went to town and got stoned and got drunk and came back and burnt down the school. So there I was in the middle of northern Ghana with a burned down school that I was meant to be working at after a year. But I could see the chain of events from kind of Washington decision making, World Bank's IMF, all the way down to explosion of this little school in a rural village. And so I made a decision. I was like, okay, we need to kind of change the cause. I'm not going to spend my time in aid or development work and clearing up the mess. We need to change the cause of the problem. And so that's so when I got back, I kind of to the UK, I threw myself into green politics. I spent a while working with the Tibet support group, and had some amazing experiences meeting some of the monks who fled across the Himalayas and lost all their teeth to electroshock batons and things like that. And then got into green politics and did a master's in human ecology, which was a great program because it was a combination of the spirituality with the issues, with the very practical things like a mini MBA. How do you use a spreadsheet? How do you do budgeting? Because Alistair McIntosh, who ran the program, said, I don't want you leaving here as a rebel without a clue. So he wanted to make sure that we'd done our inner work, that we understood the issues, and that we could, make a living, basically doing it. So I was that kind of put me into the politics. I helped run the Green Party's European election campaign in '99, which was the first time we got people elected. And then at some point I started feeling a little bit of dis-ease with the green movement. And it was, I think, to do with kind of slight hypocrisy around the preaching of love and respect and tolerance, and yet very little practice of it within the movement. And then anybody who didn't believe the same thing as you was immediately kind of demonized. And so something, didn't add up then. And it was at that point I was coming over to move to the Netherlands to be with my now Dutch wife. And I can't remember how, but I ended up getting a hold of Ken Wilber's book, A Theory of Everything. And that kind of helped everything fall into place for me, from the value systems of spiral dynamics, of why people do different things, understood the dynamics in the green movement, but also understood that if I wanted to make a difference in the world, I had to kind of clean up my inner world because otherwise I'd just be projecting my own mess on the world around me. So that's what really started me on my spiritual practice, with a kind of core, simple but disciplined meditation practice. And then, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of your listeners know, after you've been doing that for a while, one day you get up off the cushion and you don't lose the state. So the state kind of stays with you during the day. And at that point, energies start awakening in your body, the Kundalini and everything starts to happen. So anyway, yeah, so that, and I founded a couple of organizations in the Netherlands, Center for Human Emergence, inspired by Don Beck's work with spiral dynamics and the integral approach. And did business consulting for a bit, because I felt I needed to understand the world of business, the corporate world. It felt like it needed to be part of the solution. And at that point, I'd only been part of politics and the non-profit kind of world. So I did that for a few years, successfully applying very basic integral approaches and theory use at Otto Scharmer's very early days of presencing and all of that. And then at some point realized, okay, I now understand this system, how it works, how you can make change work. And was literally, it was a moment of the earth calling me back. It's kind of, okay, you understand all of that now, you've done that. You know how to make money in the corporate world, in consulting. I'd written a book, Evolutionary Leadership, which was the first one I wrote, and we did a big launch and was doing public speaking and all of that. And then it was, okay, time to come back and solve, some of the issues that we're facing. And so got into multi-stakeholder collaborations, 20 different organizations trying to solve different issues, basically facilitating that. And then that, what we realized after a while of doing that was we were trying to match complexity with complexity. We were trying to solve, had 20 organizations, we were trying to apply these really complex kind of integral evolutionary models, etc. And getting some results, but it felt like there must be some simplicity the other side of that complexity. And when we sat down, a group of us, to reflect on it, turned out we'd all been exploring energy at some level. So I'd been getting into geomancy and the work of Drunvalo Melchizedek and Lynn McTaggart's work, and the bookshelf was slowly growing. And then other people have been doing healing work or constellations work. And what we realized was that that there was underneath all of this complexity, there was this field of energy essentially at work. And if we could learn to work at that level, then it would be far more effective, or there'd be less of us and our heads in the way, and the systems would be far more likely to organize themselves to do what they need to do. So there was that's a big kind of letting go, because you realize you've reached the limits of your rational mind, basically, and you need other intelligences to be able to do the work. So yeah, so that's when I got more into the energetic work and did a whole 4-year training here in the Netherlands of how to work with the energetic architecture of large-scale systems, of organizations, of large areas of land. Yeah, it was probably around that time, maybe a little earlier, talking of angels. I was reading a book about angels, and I was like, okay. And somewhere in that book, it said, white feathers are often a sign of angels or something. And I was kind of, okay, if you exist, give me a sign, right? In a kind of cheeky, slightly, way. Anyway, the next day, an envelope, arrived addressed to my oldest son, and there was a card in the envelope. And he was like, I don't know, 5 or something. So I kind of opened it up. Inside that card was a little fluffy white feather. I was, all right, I surrender. Okay, thank you. So although I don't kind of see things, like I don't see angels or auras or colors or stuff visually, I'm much more, what do they call it? Claircognizant. So I just know things. I kind of get things like really quickly. So yeah, that kind of, I guess, tipped me into the whole, well, if we're going to gracefully transition as a species, if the earth is going to maintain its self-aware capacity through the human being, which is the experiment, then the human being is going to have to reconnect to its inner world, because that's where we experience the interconnectedness with all of life. And my thesis is the reason that we're in such a mess is we've forgotten the nature of our interconnectedness. But that can only be, it can be understood rationally, but it can't be felt other than experientially. And so, so that's when I was kind of, okay, that's what we need to focus on. And in my work with Ubiquity University, we kind of really then focused the university a few years ago on that side of things, helping people to get higher education degrees on the inner work, really, on the wisdom traditions and the personal development, enabling them to, what we say, go deep to go far. So doing their thesis or their dissertation as a deep dive into their inner worlds and the kind of invisible realms more. And then again, another bunch of synchronicities, ended up inheriting all the equipment and the library from something called the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. That was a 28-year research program at the School of Engineering at Princeton, where they were looking at how human intention affects the world around us. And basically, to cut a long story short, using lots of different technologies, proved beyond statistical doubt that the human mind and heart, actually, when combined, affect what should be, by all known science, otherwise random events in the world around us. So that was interesting to me, because I know the Western mind finds it hard just to accept the idea of spirituality or interconnectedness or something. But if you can link science to it, and like 28 years of research at Princeton's engineering school, not even kind of school of woo-woo or psychology or something, you know, this was like serious stuff, then it helps, it allows our kind of rational mind to somehow maybe allow for the possibility that there might be something there. So we had all of this equipment shipped across to the UK, to a place called Broughton Sanctuary, and have now created Weird Experience, WYRD, which was the Anglo-Saxon term for the interconnected web that generates all life. And it's a place people can walk into and experience their minds, hearts influencing these technologies without any physical connection between them and the device. And of course, that's what, actually, whenever people do it, they're so excited because they recognize something that they already know, but that isn't affirmed anyway in the world around them, in their education process or in the Western industrialized culture, materialist culture. So that's been another whole project, is like developing that, continuing to develop new technologies. So, you know, we're currently creating the technology to enable lamp companies to build lamps that will respond to your intention. Likewise, toys that kids can move around with their minds, what I'm calling consciousness technologies, all of which are really kind of Trojan horses into people kind of having to remember that there's something else going on here that they weren't taught at school. And then trying to go, well, how does it work? And as soon as you ask that, you know, then you've got to go inside and realize that actually the effect that you have on the world around you is related to your inner state, not to your cognitive intelligence. So I'm doing kind of that now, and continuing to work with Ubiquity, and then doing a lot of, well, on a project with interestingly enough, karmically, the World Bank, now training ministers of health and top leaders in the healthcare sector in developing countries and global south on how to be more effective in their leadership and organization in their healthcare sectors, which are highly complex, rapidly changing environments, and where the kind of traditional Western approach of hierarchical organization doesn't work. So so as you say, like a mix of things. I continue to make music and play in an Anglo-Celt folk band and sing. There you go.
We should mention this now, because I'm going to forget it by the time we wrap up the show. But back at university for you, Thomas York, Radiohead, was just maybe next door, not necessarily your roommate, but same hall.
Tom was in the room next to me and he used to kind of sit on the stairs playing his guitar, and the band that he had at that time that eventually became Radiohead, would do gigs and things. And yeah, he was an amazing musician and artist already at that time. It was quite funny actually, because a lot of their songs were quite depressing that you recognize maybe from the early Radiohead days. And so one day a bunch of us were like, Tom, can you write like a happy song? So he actually wrote this song called Happy Song. This is a happy song. Somewhere I've got a cassette like of one of those really early albums and recordings that he had, but he was an amazing character, very creative, obviously.
Well, I love the song Lotus Flower. It's 5 minutes exactly. The video's a blast. I have it on my suggested reading page via YouTube. If people go there, and on there as well, besides books and videos, is one that you just mentioned much earlier, Peter Brook Mahabharata, with the gentleman that you had come across. But I've got this can be a little hard to find. Don't pay the $200 American for this amazing DVD, but so many incredible European actors and actresses. What an incredible production. I think there's a long version, there's a short version, but it was an actual play they were putting.
Yeah.
So it's just, I mean, practically interstellar, forget stellar. I also wanted to bring up just a couple Einstein quotes real fast. Mankind will require an entirely like new form of thinking if it wishes to survive. And another quote from Einstein, the only source of knowledge is experience. Those kind of are coming into play with what you were discussing. And then finally, Findhorn is working its way in somehow. They approached it a little bit from a different angle. They went through experiences in the beginning, like in 1960s. We're talking Scotland for people who don't remember Findhorn. They've since gone defunct, unfortunately. That will happen.
Well, they still exist. I mean, the Findhorn Eco Village still exists.
Yeah, they've got the Eco Village, they've got the publishing house, but the rest of it, I think, is shuttered in terms of like you can't go there to stay and do classes.
Yeah, the college is closed down.
Yeah, so but that also happens. Ebb and flow. I'm shocked. There's gambling going on in the human casino. Can you talk to us about the broader picture of either spirituality, just consciousness studies? I mean, it seems like everyone's jumping on board now. Even the UFO UAP community is essentially, to me, just the flip side of the same pancake. We're all looking at the universe. We're all looking within. Interdimensionality is suddenly a more popular term. Where do you see this all having I don't know, traversed since the 60s, 80s, whenever you want to start and just take us through, where are we right now? On the precipice of just maybe broader awareness?
Well, it feels like it to me, but then, I'm in the middle of it. So then it probably would. I don't know if you'll get like the heavens have just opened here and it's pouring with rain. I don't know if you hear it in the background or not. No. Yeah. It's been really hot the last couple of days. So it's actually quite a blessing. In fact, one of my teachers, Richard Leviton, who does a lot with earth energies and geomancy and stuff, used to say the rain is a blessing. So there we are. We're getting blessed. Seriously blessed. I think what it is that, let me speak for kind of Western materialist industrial civilization, is that people, and COVID may have played a role in deepening this, but are realizing that there is definitely more than we are being told in terms of material reality. And at the same time, they don't feel drawn to most of the religions in their kind of traditional form. There are some people coming back to religion, but in a new form. And the hippie spirituality is kind of not attractive to the new generation. So it's got to be grounded in some way. So people are looking for some kind of meaning beyond the material world, basically. And I think what I'm finding certainly is when you can show them that there is science connected to spirituality. So it doesn't have to be just something you take on faith, but you can actually research it yourself, in a very grounded way. There is a big relief because people find, okay, so there is this other invisible world that we can't see, but it doesn't have to be religion. It doesn't have to be woo-woo. It just could be normal part of our reality, which is why we've gone with the weird brand WYRD, because it was indigenous to Northwestern Europe. It was the term for like qi and all of Tao and all of these things that we've imported from the East because we buried it so deeply in the West. But if we can awaken that meme that's indigenous, then I think it might get a lot more traction and people might feel, more embodiment around it. And of course, a lot of the folks who ended up in the US or ended up in Australia came from Northwestern Europe originally and have that history of the weird dimension, which was a perfectly accepted part of reality. It was just the place that sorcerers went to do healing or to get a feel for the future, or and it was just a part of society. And then when everything, well, first of all, when religion came in, it of course didn't want anybody else to have the power, and so wanted all the mystical stuff to be held in the hierarchy of the church and put the God outside of our world.
Kind of a common theme today. If you wanted to jump back to the UFO UAP thing with technology and everything else, maybe.
Yeah. Well, what people are finding is that the common things like knowing that someone's going to call you just before they do, or feeling that someone's looking at you and turning around and seeing that they are, all of which disprove the idea that the mind is just in the head. So there is obviously an extension of we extend our bodies, and our consciousness extends beyond the body. And in the way I generally explain it, this is like the light spectrum, where you've got a part of the light spectrum we can see and we all accept it, and there's part of the light spectrum we can't see, which we accept as well. Well, from a kind of quantum perspective, it's all information. There's just dense information that we can see, and then there's less dense information that we can't see, but is part of the same spectrum. So when we start to work in the subtle fields, then we're starting to just work with the spectrum just outside of the physical spectrum. And interestingly, if you call them information fields, that's the place from which things come into form, literally in formation. And what they found, coming back to the UAPs and UFOs, and when I've talked to remote viewers who've kind of been asked without knowing to tune into something and finding that it's a UFO craft and things, is that they communicate telepathically. And when they communicate to people, it automatically translates into the language that the person would hear it in. But it's like a kind of universal, as it were, communication. And that the craft obviously move faster than the speed of light. And so there's a whole, I think people who are into that are realizing that the consciousness development, if we're wanting to, first of all, be even seen as vaguely mature as a species by other species from other planets, we need to start doing the consciousness development stuff, because we're way behind and they're all communicating at that level anyway already. So that's the tie-in, I think, to parapsychology or the psi work or consciousness development, whatever we want to call it, is that the whole UAP dimension operates at that level. And we're going to need ambassadors for the earth, who, like we have ambassadors between countries here, we're going to need ambassadors between planets who can show up to a being from another planet, and they would kind of recognize them, and they'd be able to have some form of communication. Until we can do that, we're not likely to garner much respect from our galactic neighbors.
I would definitely put this out there. Love's the fabric of the universe. We're getting a lot of love, a lot of support, more than we realize. And I would make the suggestion that a little percentage of your inner voice that's always been with you, the good part, not hop in the Jag and go 140 kilometers an hour down. It's not your Jag either. 140 kilometers down that route. The good side of your inner voice can be, your cheerleading squad. Could be your ancestors, your relatives, guides, or more. And you would freak out if you actually heard their voice instead of just what you think is your voice. It's just a lot safer that way. If you're in the middle of a golf tournament on the 17th hole and having quite a day, you're maybe in the lead and you've decided you want to really hit that one, go for the hole in one, But if Aunt Martha's voice came in, a light being, an angel, whoever, Einstein, you'd probably drop the club and flee the premises and not finish the tourney. So yeah, and I would also mention, yeah, that vibration coming in, basic listening is what I call it. All languages, all dialects. Plus, what I love more than that is it just navigates your personality. If there's 9 billion people, whatever the number is, that's, 40 gajillion trillion thought forms. Everyone, some people don't like sushi, others like sushi. Pick a soccer team, football, and it's the same thing. And they all kind of are like sine waves canceling each other out. But at the end of the day, each person has to have it their way. And so somehow that vibration also navigates everything to leave you on cloud 9 with the response. You could have 1,000 people listening at the same time, 75 languages between them, and a bunch of dialects. Northern Japan, that prefecture, and Hindi, Telugu, you name it. But they also each got it the way that leaves them very motivated as an answer. And somehow the answers, if we compared them all, would make sense to be generally rowing in the same direction. Can you share a moment where it wasn't your either inner voice, you saw something, you felt something? It may be private. If it's private, just tiptoe around it a little. But if you want to talk about the time you tipped that cow in Vermont and angels like lifted it back up and it was like, no, it's not the time for the cow to fall over. Do you have something you can share that either remains unexplained or you're like, no, that also helped firmly put me on my path and a little more oomph, not just the envelope.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I think to like key moment the last couple of years for Ubiquity. So at some point I was obviously one of the founders originally and then stepped back a bit and some other people came in and then that kind of crashed. And then I was, okay, am I going to step back into the center, and lead this organization or not? And it was a moment of real surrender where I was, okay, if I'm going to step back in to lead Ubiquity University, what does it need to become? And the answer was instant, and it was like a modern day mystery school. And I was, okay, well, that makes sense. That'll go back to our roots as Wisdom University. So before Ubiquity University, it was Wisdom University. And I was, well, that's great, but how are we going to make a business of it? How are we going to make it possible? And the answer again was, well, partnerships. I was going to partnerships, okay. Well, that's a bit vague. and these were slightly different moments. One was kind of collapsing on bed, and the other was gazing down into nature in the Yorkshire Dales. And it was, people like the Shift Network. Yeah, well, they've got loads of courses, but they can't award degrees. What if people who had taken courses with a lot of these online organizations could then use those courses for course credit and then go on and complete a degree at Ubiquity with, doing their thesis or dissertation? So that, was pretty clear to me that was a business model and a potential strategy that could keep us alive as an organization, because there was no way we were going to make a business selling courses. Too many other good course providers out there. But the key question always is, but what's your niche in the ecology? So if Ubiquity's got a raison d'etre, how does it add to the ecology? Not how does it compete with all the other players, but how does it uplift the whole ecology? And so then it was, okay, well, that's our niche. Our niche is the ability to be able to offer degrees in these areas. And so we started reaching out to different potential partners who have great learning programs and but can't award degrees. And now we have over 20, within a year, over 20 degree programs with these different partners where the people come and do their coursework with the partner, then bring that coursework into Ubiquity to complete it, to complete a master's or a PhD through a thesis or dissertation. And although we're not there 100% yet, we had the best year ever as a business last year, and are definitely getting close to being able to break even and scale it. So that was, I can't say I wouldn't be, and I never have been able to say to people that was my idea. It doesn't feel like it was my idea. It was like an idea that was given to me. Same with, I don't know if you've heard of Humanity Rising, but we run this daily broadcast called Humanity Rising, and again, that was just early hours one morning when I woke up, we had this idea and I was like, what should we call it? And it was like Humanity Rising. And I was, nice name. And so again, I would never say I came up with the name, but in a way, but somebody did say to me the other day, but you need to take credit for making yourself available for the name to drop in. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So yeah, so it became Humanity Rising. So a lot of that's how it tends to work more for me is moments of surrender and questions. Same with Volution, like you just showed a copy of my Volution book. I was sitting there doing the research, for my PhD, because my hunch was Involution and Evolution were too linear, like as a description. It didn't fit, like it's much more like a torus, like what you're showing there. And so I just sat back and relaxed. And I was what do involution and evolution have in common? Of course, the answer is obvious. You see it. Evolution, literally. You take off the in and you take off the air. You got Volution. And I was, oh, Volution, cool. I wonder what that means. So I Googled Volution and it turns out it means spin, which of course what everything does. And like the image I had in my mind was a torus. So torus does what our cells do, what our planet and galaxy, everything spins. And so that's how I ended up with evolution theory. Again, something which I couldn't really claim as my own, as a label, but was kind of given to me from somewhere. So those are the kind of experiences I have more, and maybe other people would, you translate them through different lenses. So maybe, my angels gave me the name, or whatever, the planet gave me the name, or the cosmos gave whatever. But it came from somewhere, that wasn't my rational mind. Anyway, let's put it that way. It could be my intuitive mind.
I love it. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about where you think you're headed next for your time. Remember, it's easy to get comfortable and to keep doing, sort of the same thing. And especially the more you're, a bestseller or something, a professor experiencing success at the university, it goes on and on and on. I'll quote a NASA astronaut, Story Musgrave. He had a great quote that I just love to apply to everything. Getting out of the comfortable path, that's what exploration is all about. Can you share with us what you think might be around the corner? You've done a bunch of books. You've literally worn, I'm going to say at least 35, 40 hats. Do you think you might get into your energy work a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's probably where it's going to go, but it's more what I'm excited about is the consciousness technology, because of the kind of Trojan horse potential it has. So if we can get lamps like into meeting rooms in businesses around the world that glow as the group comes into coherence and dims down when they fall out of coherence, is what we are making right now, then that's going to have an effect. It's going to be psychoactive. It's what I call socio-feedback, like kind of biofeedback, but it's feedback on the collective field, socio-feedback. So that, or toys into houses, or that's the kind of, because I've never grown a business.
If there's 20 people at a conference room table and the technology exists, and let's say 18 of them are definitely using it coherence, the lamp is lit, but what happens if there's a little bit of a small personality that likes to joke around a little and they don't mind flipping it off? Like they just send the consciousness pulse and they shoot the lamp off. There's no way to point the finger.
No, well, what you do is well, this is an interesting thing, that the conscious group, and this is part of it's really about the practice that comes as a result of the lamp, would ask, hey, what happened just then? What did we do that made our field drop?
And then that's a great point. I say the same thing, but I do it a different way. If you could start seeing auras on everyone, which I would argue that you already can, you can see light flowing a whole Walmart or a department store, or a soccer pitch distance apart, flowing from your hands. But let's just say overnight, everybody woke up and could see colors and auras flowing on everyone. And you're a real estate person, gone off to Taiwan. You have 20 different groups to meet with, and you got to pick one to do a development with. Big money involved. 15 of them are flowing okay with their light. 4, you're like, whoa, we can't do business with them. We're going to lose money. That is a game changer overnight, forcing humanity into a little bit more consciousness, or at least awareness, or slowing the roll up top with thinking. So it's fascinating with the devices. What's the one device? Is there one already publicly available, or what's the one device you don't mind talking about on a show that just absolutely tickles you pink? Is it the lamp, or is it the children's toy?
Well, I mean, the one that's already available is the research device called the Weirdoscope.
Hmm.
You can kind of put in a collective space and track the field of consciousness as it evolves over time during the event. And then you can look at, okay, we did, most of the research has been in tantric rituals, actually. And you can see like the key moment in the ritual is when you get the biggest effect on the field. We've also used it in ICUs. You mentioned ICUs.
There was a dad joke involved with that, just for
All
people.
right.
Yeah.
The moment somebody passes away, you get a readout on the Weirdoscope, which has no physical connection to the person.
Yep.
So that's kind of scientific proof that something non-physical happens at the moment of death. So those are now available. At goweird.org is where we kind of have all the weird stuff developed. And
Have you tried it at comedy clubs yet at all? Just with people?
Not yet. No, not comedy. Because football stadiums, soccer stadiums, the Northampton University is now researching that.
Yep.
Harvard Medical School want to research it at Sadhguru's Center in Tennessee. We just had Monroe Institute in their events. So different organizations, but also just facilitators who want to get feedback on their process. So they will, have the Weirdoscope running, be facilitating their event, and then they can look back and see, okay, what had the biggest effect on the field? And then next time, maybe they try something else and see, oh, this had a big effect, or this didn't seem to have a big effect. So like I say, instead of individual feedback, biofeedback, it's socio-feedback on the field as a whole. So, I mean, and we're getting a lot of interest, and all the scientists in the area are recognizing its value and its innovation in the sector. So that's exciting. I think the experiment I'm kind of really intrigued about is one that they started at Princeton and never completed, which was basically plants in a room with lights on a dimmer switch and a device, one of these Weirdoscope devices, a random event generator connected to it. And what happened was that the plants started to regulate their need for light. So they would be affecting the device and dimming or brightening the lamp as they needed the light. So that's really cool. And then there are pet things. So one experiment they did at Princeton is that they had a feeder out the back for raccoons, I think it was. And and the raccoons had to bring the field into a certain level of coherence to unlock the feeder, and they could do it. They could just they got the habit of being able to manipulate these random event generators that, according to mainstream science, can't be affected by anything because it's quantum random. Nothing, no explanation for how anything in the physical world can affect these devices. Yet these raccoons, with their consciousness somehow, were affecting them to the extent that they could then get food out of the feeder. So those kind of gadgets, which it's one of my colleagues at Weird, Kirsty, she uses this term re-enchantment. We've lost our enchantment in the world, and we need to re-enchant the world, like bring the magic back in. And I think things that do that make people go, whoa, how does that work? Or what's that about? What is that? And then therefore, what does that tell me about reality? Or what does that tell me about how I should be showing up in reality? Yeah, those, and the kids' toys, of course, would be fantastic, because kids generally are much better at manipulating this technology than adults, because adults overthink it. So there's just a huge, it's a huge sector. As I say, I'm calling it consciousness technology, and I think it's going to be one of the biggest domains, in the next 10, 20 years. But it's the effect that it's going to have on people and the way they think about themselves and the world that they're in and their relationship to it, that's actually the end goal. Yeah.
Well, I love it. I'm going to skip around a little bit. We're going to come basically back to classic Zen training, Buddhism, Joshu, Blue Cliff Notes, the whole gateless gate, doorless door, that entry point, and how Seth, Peaceful Warrior, the movie, Socrates at the Bar, played by Nick Nolte, they all talk about it's not going to be found externally. You got to go to here. last place anybody wants to go. But I wanted to ask, you mentioned Ken Wilber earlier. Have you actually met him, had the chance to meet him along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Ken is our inaugural chancellor at Ubiquity University. So yeah, we have quite some interaction. He read Volution for me and gave me some feedback on it. And yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, I didn't know. He's not an elusive character. He's certainly out and about, but definitely, how do I do this? Has had such a successful path that he's a little more, just doing his thing a little more quietly here and there than some.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the classic, the whole point of Zen, the student comes running up to the master to show that he's here, gotten out of his thinking, he's arrived, the fruit is ripe, he's ready to join the teachers or leave the school and graduate. So things like, what is the white ox standing in the field, with a question to sort of stump the master, and the master whacks him over the head and says, you dumb ox. Or what about it when I seek to be Buddha? The master says, what a tremendous waste of energy. And then the student comes back with a quick one, cat-like reflexes, can't ever put down a student. Well, what about it when I don't waste energy? In that case, the master says, you are Buddha. So can you talk to us about, this has been going on for thousands of years, pointing to getting out of here, getting to here. Has that influenced you as well? Is there a point you did East Asian studies of some sort, or you love Joe Shu? There's a Green translation that's incredible. A fellow with the last name of Green. What do you love about that aspect of things? Remember the whole concept of geese flying into a pond, landing. There's really no east or west. It's the human mind civilization that slaps, all the lingo on.
Well, absolutely, because it points to the nature of the absolute and the non-dual, and I think that's fundamental to be able to do any of this, because you need to, when you let go of the relative, you need to let go into the absolute, but then you've got to put them back together, which is the non-dual, so I think I went through, when I first came across Ken's work and started the meditation, I was focused on developing the relationship to the absolute, and the kind of surrender. And then it was something I think Ken said at some point, made this distinction between the absolute and the non-dual. And the non-dual is the integration of the absolute and the relative, where they coexist. And that really brought it together again for me, that the kind of spiritual activism, so the engagement with the world in the context of non-attachment. So, doing what needs to be done, in the acceptance that you will never know whether what you're doing will actually have the desired effect, even in your lifetime. What it does is it makes the action lighter. But what this work shows, the kind of consciousness research shows, is that you have a bigger effect on the field when you're less attached to the outcome you're trying to have.
Can I extrapolate on that even more? I don't even know if I use the right verb. I'm not a great person with words and lingo, but so back to the feather, you had asked the universe for a feather, I believe, the white feather. It showed up that way. I'm going to remind folks that you can ask for, and I'm going to ruin this. You can ask for an electronic feather, a feather made out of universal love, consciousness, light, literally in your kitchen. But you'd have to be like either doing the ayahuasca, just really happy you just came back from a Coldplay concert, you're on cloud 9, and you really meant it from the heart, getting out of your own way, like you talked about, lightening up. But you can actually, and this has happened for folks, guests on the show, a feather coming down, but it ain't going to be there tomorrow. It's made out of light in a way that maybe it lands on a glass. Balancing. It's impossible. A feather cannot land on the edge of a glass in your kitchen while you're in the middle of doing your thing. You're happy enough to allow for this, and it's balancing there. And that short circuits everything that's the civilization, the structure, and you literally, your jaw drops and you've experienced a city or a mini miracle or whatever you, SIDDHI, blah, blah, blah. But so I wanted to just, if you don't plant the seed, someone at home watching this in 2028 is going to be like, huh, I like that enthusiasm. Why not? So if you don't ask, you don't get.
I think that's the effect that the weird technologies have, is when people come into weird experience and they find, like we had there was a group coming the other day, and we have a REG connected to a drum, a Native American drum, and we have it drumming in a random pattern. along with parallel with the randomness of the reg, and then people have to try to bring it into coherent rhythm.
Yep.
Woman just got into a trance, and she was going, and this drum was just going boom, 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 boom. And when that happens, not just for her, but for all the people watching, it has the same effect. It's like, well, okay, so something's going on here that no one's saying to me. And that's what we need. We need these seeds, right? That disturb the Western materialist mindset and make people kind of put a crack, as it were, in the worldview, so that there's a space for the light to come in, right? And kind of, because that won't go away. That experience won't go away for people. So the more we can give people those kind of experiences, the better. Because I think that's what we really need over here, anyway.
And okay, now I'm going to read a quote to you, and this is from Fritjof Capra, which, again, pronouncing names, lingo, terminology, it's like a minefield for me. If I run off to the Buddhist community and I'm like, hey, do you want to meet Buddha? I mean, I'm asking for it. I'm a glutton for punishment, though, for the last 12 years. Here comes the quote. Whatever the yogin sees is his instruction, and realization that all he sees is unborn. That is the most excellent guru. Innocence is the way to realize non-duality, for here the effects of virtue and vice are one. Now, I sat with that quote since 1991 or 92. I wrote it into like a little diary when I was in New York City working on Wall Street. It took me all the way to like 2008, sitting in an Acura parking lot on a curb, watching leaves swirl in a circle, to finally understand what non-duality is. I did not have a teacher, professor, or a Far East studies guide I could call and be like, hey, what's non-duality? It was Thich Nhat Hanh's Pieces Every Step book, his only non-sentence in the whole little teeny book, which I recommend. It's on my suggested reading page if people want to go to the website. By the way, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and especially anything that you're reacting to that Peter's added to this conversation. That'd be awesome. It helps us get this out to more people, especially in the years ahead. But back to the leaves swirling and everything else, he's blah, 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 the sentence goes not to, blah, 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 the sentence ends with non-duality. And then the only non-sentence in the whole book was not to, period. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I waited 18 years for the definition of non-duality. And it made sense at the time. That was the most important thing. Can you talk to us about, there's an entire, and it's been around a long time, non-duality movement, but I would argue that it's gotten a little more popular. Same thing with consciousness. You have to, from your perspective, with all the decades now, aren't you seeing certain movements sort of surge ahead or expand a little? Could you talk to us about that landscape a little?
I'm not really kind of that connected, I'd say, to those movements. In particular, I was quite aware of them at, say, early 2000s, when I was very much getting in the integral movement. I mean, I have seen some confusion, which is the confusion between absolute and non-dual, because you have some of the traditions who say this is all illusion, Maya, and therefore we need to kind of transcend it and get beyond it. And that, I think, is part actually of the Western disease, because it's an evolutionary transcendent impulse without the immanence impulse.
You don't get to taste your pizza, do you?
Right, exactly. Like, well, if I slapped you around the face, would you feel it? Oh, but it's just an illusion.
It's Maya. Yeah, I hear you.
But that's because they've mistaken absolute for non-dual. So they think that absolute is but you've incarnated in a body, so you're here in the relative world for a reason, right? So find out what that reason is and work out how you can hold your existence in the context of an absolute. And if you can do that, then that's the non-dual, because like you say, it's not two. Yeah, and you can't talk about it because it's right, because language by itself is relative.
It's the gloves that you stick on your hands, your energy that you're shooting out. You're either hugging or slapping, but it never quite approaches the actual. It's that whole. Was it Eckhart's? Actually, it's probably Buddhism. The finger that points to the moon is not the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
all of that it's that when you get into that. I mean, from the consciousness research stuff, when people build a relationship with so feel connected to the device they're trying to influence, if it's an intention-driven experiment, they have a much bigger effect. And that's kind of, we're one. So when you start to experience a oneness between you and something else, that's when you start to have an effect on the field.
Have you found a university to take up another project with the device, which would be the water? Remember, I'm the gentleman that thank you. And so have you, that one must have jumped out very early on as a potential project somewhere, and there's so much interest in it. Has someone taken up that banner and running with it with the device?
Not with the device. I mean, given, it's only really been out for a few months now. But I did come across somebody the other day who had further developed the Emoto's work. So that is, I think that was a good one because it was so, I was going to say the word I got was crystal clear. Which,
there's no pun intended there.
Because it was like, okay, water, information, and then people could do the experiments with plants. So, kids do this at school now. There's a plant, you kind of send negative vibes to it, a plant, you send positive vibes, and lo and behold, the plant with positive vibes, grows better. Hey.
And if it was music and you can't cite your own music, if we're using music instead, we're not going to name anything that we think would harm a plant. But what have you really enjoyed for music in the last, I'm going to say 15 years? Is there any up and coming band that you think is super expansive? I'm going to just buy you a little bit of time to think about it. There's Radiohead, Lotus Flower, 5 minutes long. It's been out a long time. I love it, the meditational aspect of it. But I'll mention Grimes and Small Black. Two bands, but that can get really far out there. Grimes has got like 7 levels of layers of music all at once, which Radiohead does a little bit as well. Those are the only two that I can think of that like layer a ton of stuff. What musical bands would you recommend for folks? And we're totally going off the beaten track, so you're on the spot here.
Well, it often depends on the season for me. In winter, I really enjoy the Celtic, Irish, kind of Scottish folk music. In the summer, it's reggae, and in particular, a South African reggae singer, Lucky Dube, who was very spiritual as well, and had the spiritual activism, so was committed to making the world a better place, but wrote amazing music, and unfortunately was driving his car one day with his kids in the back, and some guy pulled up parallel to the car and shot him. And he'd kind of died really much too early. Well, and but he, yeah, that's it. Lucky Dube, that's him. Listen to Lucky Dube. It's brilliant. I actually read somebody wrote a biography of him as well, because he was big into the proper Rastafarian spiritual tradition as well. And I've got a picture of him sitting just there. It's really nice. It's a really nice picture.
Oh.
Got it off Redbubble, actually.
Oh, great photo or drawing.
And the other day I put on UB40 again for the first time for like in ages, and I was, this is really good stuff. But he has the content, to it all as well. So he was on a mission. So I love his stuff. It really kind of partly depends on my mood. I've also when I was younger, I was into kind of not hard rock, but I guess slightly soft rock. So there's a band called Magnum, a British band who I actually went to see live. Also really meaningful content as well. So if I'm more in a rock kind of mood, then Magnum does it. And then there is, of course, Johnny Clegg, who was another South African musician, not so much reggae, but his stuff is brilliant as well, just meaning and rhythm. So I guess I'm always looking for something that's generally got some meaningfulness to it. And being a kind of folk singer myself, it's all about story, So the Celtic music, all the folk music tells a story normally, and so it's having the story as part of it is fun, yeah.
Well, I'm going to add one more only because I'm a runner for 40. Let me do my age. I'm 56. I've been running since I was 14. So for 42 years. And I was just running on the North San Antonio, very 12% incline hills before it got too hot. So way early this morning. But Enya came on. I had Enya on the playlist. Boy, it actually was very well received by my body and my legs when I was puffing and puffing towards the end of the run. So I'm actually going to proudly say I listen to Enya while I'm running, and it's good. I'm very proud of that. Okay, we've reached the time of the show where I've done this on every show, but let me think. One that is yet to be released where it just wasn't going to happen. Out of maybe 90 shows that have been taped, we've got episode 69 out with Vinnie Adams right now in the UK. I'm dating this show when we did the taping. It's in the spring and in May. But we have 140 booked into basically 142 booked into basically February of 2025. So please be sure to check out that listing on the website as the master list of all the guests, 50 shows in 2023. And again, 142 into February of 2025. Amazing guests from all over. And I'm not kidding. A White House physician from 1996 to 2001, a former Delta Force operator, a Miss USA, professors, healers from all over the world, 40 plus show hosts. This small little show does not deserve it, but yours truly as a host, class act, tells jokes, and I blow sage, which is what we're coming up to next. I'm going to light sage. If no one's ever done this before, which you should have if you've watched the show, I light this. You smell it through 2 screens. As a guest on 55 shows in the last 2.5 years, I've done this for producers, show hosts, and audiences who come to this late. So there's no time and space. You watch this a year later, you can still smell the sage. I think we're back into Peter Mary's camp of it ain't exactly how we think it works, because it's not about thinking, but less thinking. With that, I've lit it. Some people start tasting it right away. I've only got one bit of rule or structure, and after 12 years, I should remember what it is. Oh yeah, ask the universe, angels, if you don't mind, to get you out of your head into your heart. Make it nice. Own it with an Om Sairam, thank you, rock and roll, whatever you want. But just own it. It's got to be your patented method, whether we're talking soccer, scoring a goal, the pitch, football, or writing a book. You have to take your own steps. You have to do your own figuring out. So here's the sage. Peter, are you catching the sage with a red-tailed hawk feather, blowing it your way? We did this before the show. We kind of know it works, so I don't like to get sandbagged on air. But you're getting the sage. Anybody at home wants to get a flower, beach, ocean smell. If you want to close your eyes, hear the wave action. But this is you and the universe, so it's your connection. And what Peter's been talking about this whole time is letting go. Are you getting anything else on top of the sage? A flower or any ocean smell?
No, it's just I get the sensation of sage, like not the smell directly, but I tend to has a certain quality to it. That's what I get, the quality of it. Yeah.
Well, you're very sage, and I gotta ask, can we switch to your Italian trip you were just on? It was northern Italy in a very spiritual spot. Again, I'm not going to be able to do it justice, but you certainly will be able to. Could you share that just for a second on what that trip was about and how special this place is?
Well, it was a family holiday, but then as part of that, we built in a day tour of a place called Damanhur that is near Turin, and it's a spiritual community that's been there since the 1970s and came out of what was really a kind of parapsychology research group in Turin, where they were trying out telepathy and doing lots of reading and things. Anyway, they founded a community that's grown to a few hundred thousands of people living there now, and were guided to this place. And when they showed up, this guy came down the mountain and said, "I've been waiting for you because I've been told that some people are going to come here and build something that's going to be important for the world." So they ended up getting this land, this whole piece of land. And the guy died like a few months later, who'd been on the hill. His work was done, as it were. And then they started building temples into this mountain. So carving out the hard rock, literally with kind of hand tools first and then electric drills and things later. But and kept it secret for now 20 years. And have built these incredible temples dedicated to the different elements and things with beautiful, beautiful art. You can find their website if it's DAMAN, Daman, and then Hur, HUR. And but also on specific energy lines. So they've done a lot of work with energetics, developed this amazing technology called Selfica, which works with the consciousness energy. That's it. Federation of Damanhur. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And it's an experiment, and like with all, and they're very transparent about the fact that it's not an utopia. They're all humans, and they have their ups and downs and their struggles. And when Falco, who was the founder, passed away nearly 10 years ago, Since then, governance has been an issue. Like, how do you run something after your founder's been the inspiration and leading light, passes on? Their real dedication to the experiment and to learning and to sharing as well. But these, if you ever get a chance, you're in North Italy, go and visit. Make sure you do the day trip so you get to see the temples and the sacred woods and this amazing mother tree that they have in the sacred woods. And they developed this technology called music of the plants, which is a device you kind of put a stick into by the roots of the plant, and then you connect a clip to the leaf, and then it translates the electromagnetics of the plant into music.
Wow, that has got. Did you get to hear that when you were there?
Yeah, I have one of the devices. Like, you can buy the device from them. Yeah, it's really, really cool. And of course, the plants learn to play the music, more as they go along. And then you can play interaction with plants. So if you send love to the plant, does the music change? There's these kind of things. It's brilliant. It's a real kind of model of the kind of work we need to be doing, because they're very disciplined in their experimentation as well. It's like what works, what doesn't work. The place is full of art, sculptures and everything else. Amazing.
Okay, I'm going to give you 3 to 4 quotes and see which way some of the quotes, not all of them, take you or inspire you to tell us a little bit more. First, from Eckhart Tolle, who you are requires no belief. In fact, every belief is an obstacle. What about when the blind turtle happens on a floating plank? This is another one of those student-teacher things from the whole Zen school. What about it when the blind turtle happens on a floating plank? A monk asked. The teacher said it's not an accident. Next, Luke, this is Star Wars, Obi-Wan talking to Luke Skywalker. Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend on our own point of view. And finally, being aware of stillness means to be still. To be still is to be conscious without a thought. Eckhart Tolle again, New Earth. We're sticking with Eckhart today. Were any of those ones that popped out a response?
Well, I think truths we cling to and beliefs are very close. So I think the thing is, for me anyway, we all believe things. And it's about being, on the one hand, transparent about those beliefs, and on the other hand, not being attached to them. So being open to them. So on my website, I have a whole piece which is, this is what I believe. I believe this. I believe that. I believe that. And it's what I believe at the moment.
Have you had to go back and edit it though every 5 months?
Yeah. Well, that's the point. It's like, okay, do I need to make this or add something or whatever? So it's not so much about belief itself. It's about your relationship to the belief. Even if we believe that beliefs are a bad thing, that's a belief. So we all believe stuff. It's about being conscious of what we believe, and then being unattached to our beliefs. And this is one of the problems with science at the moment. Why the stuff I'm talking about that they did at Princeton for 28 years, starting in the 1970s, hasn't changed the world, because science has become scientism and attached to its own belief, which means that hasn't followed the data. It's followed its belief, which is why it's kind of gone down this dead end basically of materialism. So yeah, I think that's a key one. Anyway, but maybe it's a good time to round off. I notice my energy lagging. It's getting late. Need to get the kids to bed. That kind of thing.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been Angels, Positivity, and Love. We've had Peter Merry on, stellar background, doing a lot for humanity, advancing consciousness technology to help us out as well, just to get us out of our head into our hearts. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for the invitation and asking the questions.
Absolutely. Till next time, if we get a chance in the years ahead, look forward to it. Take care.